Tynee has recently released its third generation of Tynee Mini and cleverly named it the Tynee Mini 3. But this time, there's a Mini 3 and a Mini 3 Pro. What are the differences between the 3 and 3 Pro? And as someone who doesn't place much value on power and range, why did I even agree to cover these extremely powerful shortboards? We'll look at the specs for the Tynee Mini 3 and also the Tynee Mini 3 Pro. I've ridden both of these boards. First, let me talk about why I'm even covering this board. Nowadays, if a board is just more powerful than the previous generation board, or if it's just like adding like gimmicky features that I don't care about, I'm not going to cover it. We have so many powerful boards now. Like a board being more powerful than before, like to me, that's not a selling point because I don't need my board to be more powerful than before. I don't need to ride even farther than before. Those seem to be the key selling points of the Tynee Mini 3 and the 3 Pro. Like bigger battery, bigger motors, more powerful, more range. So why am I even covering these? Let me talk about that first. There are two things about these boards that I'm interested in. First of all, the Mini 3 uses a Hobbywing ESC. And in fact, I'm mostly interested in the Hobbywing version, the Mini 3. The Mini 3 Pro, I mostly just want to compare that with the Mini 3 so that you know what each of them has and like which one you should get. But the stuff I'm interested in is mostly on the Mini 3. Okay, on the Mini 3, if you choose the 105mm wheels, which is the hydro wheels, I think they really should have just written that here. No, wait, this is with hub motors. Okay, if you choose the Mini 3 with belt drive and you choose the 105 wheels, then you get the hydro wheels. Okay, this is so confusing. The hub motor 105 wheels are different from the belt motor 105 wheels. In my case, I have the Mini 3 with belt drive and 105mm hydro wheels. If you order this option specifically, then your board also comes with these belt covers. Like, what do you call this? The belt drive is sealed, as opposed to being open. Let's see what open looks like. There's got to be a picture. Yeah, this is open. Okay, so the belts and pulleys are visible. This is how most belt drive systems are. But if you choose the hydro wheels, then they're enclosed. So this is, in theory at least, this is advantageous because then you don't get little pebbles going into the belt drive system between the belt and the pulley and messing things up. That's one thing I wanted to check out, like how do they design it, how effective is it? And the other thing I wanted to check out is the app. The app is not made specifically for this board. It probably works with a bunch of different Hobbywing boards. The app is called Tuya Smart. Let's start with the app, and then we'll talk about the closed belt drive cover, and then we'll talk about the rest of the board. Okay, so as you can see here, there's a scooter icon. Well, first of all, this app is for lots of different types of devices, including scooters. So when I added this board, I had to add it as a scooter. And you can see in here from these features that this is clearly designed for a scooter. Like you're riding a scooter and you would mount your phone on the handlebar and kind of use it as a dashboard. Yeah, like you can lock your board, which, you know, you're not gonna lock your board because anyone can just pick it up. But some scooters are pretty heavy, so like, you know, nobody's gonna pick them up. On this screen, there's not that many features you can use. Cruise is just cruise control. You can do that on the remote also. The headlight feature is really the tail light. Level is just like 1, 2, 3, 4, the different speed modes. The more interesting stuff is under more. So a lot of this stuff is stuff that you can set on the remote itself. But to access the menu on the remote, you have to repair the remote. Some of these things are more convenient to configure on the app. And then you click on sure. It's not okay, it's sure. RLOS auto brake. This is if you want your if you want the board to brake by itself if the remote becomes disconnected. So there are pros and cons to that. I guess I don't really need it. I mean, I could turn it off. I don't know, well, whatever. Speed limit. Okay, so this is useful. This is something that I don't think you can configure on the remote. For speed limit 1, I think the default was 15 and I increased that to 20 because this board, even in speed mode 1, it feels adequately powerful. So like for me, just riding in town, riding through traffic and stuff, mode 1 is actually enough for me. By the way, lately, like because it's summer, I don't even wear a helmet. So that's why I usually ride below 20 kilometers per hour. That's why I set the speed limit for mode 1 to 20. Because if I ride below 20 kilometers, anyway, I have a different video about that. You can also adjust the acceleration strength. I'm just keeping these at default. Deceleration, I assume that's brake strength. current voltage 50.3, so that's kind of useful. The Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro are both powerful. Mini 3 Pro is quite a bit more powerful, but the Mini 3, I think for most people is going to be more than good enough in terms of power. For some people, I think you may want to turn down the acceleration strength. In fact, I might even do that because, for example, if I let someone else try this board, I might want to turn down the acceleration, like even for mode 1. So yeah, it's nice. The app is nice. The design, I mean, this looks like one of those apps designed by an engineer with no design background, but it's got some useful features and a lot of not useful features, but it does have useful features. So cool. That app was for the Mini 3, not the Mini 3 Pro. Mini 3 Pro uses Tynee's own ESC, not Hobbywing. So yeah, it can't use this app. So I suppose other boards that use Hobbywing or future boards that use Hobbywing, they'll probably be able to use this app also. But for now, as far as I know, only the Mini 3 can use it, as far as I know, again. For the Mini 3 Pro, there's a lot of stuff you can customize on the remote itself without the app. I'll talk about that later. Let's look at the this belt cover. It's interesting, and this is only on the Mini 3, not the Mini 3 Pro. The Mini 3 Pro, even though you can choose the hydro wheels, it does not come with the sealed belt covers. I guess this is more for people who frequently have belts that break. For myself, I rarely have belts break. It does happen once in a while, but it's for me, it's pretty rare. So I don't really deal with that issue, but I guess some people must live in places where, I don't know, there's a lot of sharp pebbles. So I guess this can be useful. I took a close look at it. I opened it up also. I don't think this will do a good job of keeping out very, very fine like sand, but sand is really, honestly, it's hard to do anything about sand because sand just, yeah, it gets everywhere. But for regular size pebbles, but like, you know, the kind of stuff that would get stuck between the belt and the pulley, I think this will probably do a good job. However, I'm curious to see how long it lasts because this bottom part of the cover on belt drive boards, this part very frequently breaks or at least gets chewed up, because it always scrapes stuff. Even though there's a little bit of clearance between that part and the ground, inevitably it's going to get scraped up and oftentimes it's going to break. It's just something that happens. For me, so far it's fine, but I've only had this board for a few weeks. Should you get this board just for this sealed belt drive cover? Probably not, unless you're one of those people who always break their belts because of like small debris getting inside. Then maybe. But like for me, that hardly ever happens to me. There is a downside, actually. There's a downside to this because the cover, it's a little bit bigger than the standard cover. Yeah, it does take up a little bit more room, so you have a little bit less ground clearance between like here and the ground. And these are not the same. Like this belt cover, like this piece and this piece, they're not the same. This is a little bit smaller, but overall, I mean, I'm still glad to see that, you know, there's at least some innovation going on. This kind of stuff may be more useful for the Explorer, Tynee Explorer, because that one's made to go off-roading and stuff. Okay, anyway, let's move on. I'm looking at the Tynee Mini 3 specs, Mini 3 and also Mini 3 Pro. We'll look at both. Both of them have 4 different speed modes. On the Mini 3, it says here that it goes up to 32 miles per hour or 52 kilometers per hour. In the app, you can actually raise that up to 62 kilometers per hour. I'm not going to test it out. I'm not even going to go 52. So on the Mini 3 Pro, it says that it goes up to 50 kilometers per hour. And on the remote, you can configure that you can change that to up to 60 kilometers per hour. Range. So Tynee claims 42 kilometers for both of them. And it says here, tested by Aiden, who is 65 kilograms on a flat road with speed mode number 2. So I guess that's the normal mode. He says if you use 105mm wheels, the range will decrease. So then he's probably using the 90mm wheels. The faster you ride, the shorter your range will get. So 42 kilometers, I think that's reasonable for a 393 watt-hour battery. So this is almost a 400 watt-hour battery, 42 kilometers. Yeah, that's totally reasonable, totally achievable, especially for a lighter person. Aiden is tall. I'm surprised that he's only 65 kilograms. Skinny, I guess. So yeah, like he says here, the faster you ride, the less range you're gonna get. I mean, there's a lot more to it. Like the more you're accelerating and braking, like if you're accelerating a lot, you're probably going to eat up more range also. Also, if you're heavier, if you're riding up an incline, so there's like all sorts of stuff that can affect your range. Hill climbing 30 to 35 and 50% for the Pro. So yeah, the brake lights. Brake lights are nice. I'm not sure how useful they are. So during the day, you're definitely not going to see them at all because the lights are under the tail. At night, they might be a little bit visible because of just the reflection from the ground. But the tail puck is not translucent. So the tail puck is not going to illuminate the brake light. So yeah, there is a brake light, but most of the time you won't even see it. Battery max voltage, 54.6 volts. So that's 13S battery voltage. For most of us, I don't think you need to care too much about that. 10S, 12S, 13S. If what you're after is high performance, then I guess that, yeah, generally speaking, higher voltage is going to be better. Battery cell brand, Molicel. So for the Mini 3, I think it's using the M42A from Molicel. And the Mini 3 Pro, it says here Molicel P42A. So I'm not sure why they didn't mention the cell for the Mini 3, but they're different. But they're both from Molicel. Nowadays, I don't really emphasize the battery brand too much, because I find that I've learned that there's a lot more to a quality battery pack than just a battery cell. Okay, this is going to be a whole other video at some point. I have a partial script about that. I just never finished it. But anyway, Molicel is a reputable battery cell brand. Battery capacity, 13S2P, 393 watt hours. So for a shortboard, that is pretty big. Roughly 40 kilometers range. That's a lot on a shortboard. Very, very, very few people are going to ride up to 40 kilometers on a shortboard in one go, but this allows you to ride for multiple days without charging the board. The downside of this is that it makes the board more heavy. Having a large battery, which is why for me, a bigger battery is not something I want. I don't need more range. So for me, more weight is just more weight that I have to carry. But again, if you don't care about the weight, then having a bigger battery means you don't have to recharge as often. Waterproof battery, that is a bold claim, but note that they're just saying the battery is waterproof. What about every other part of the board? They do have waterproofing stuff on like the plugs and stuff. It's waterproof enough that I felt pretty confident about riding it in heavy rain. But even then, I was a little bit concerned about the remote because the remote itself is not waterproof. And I don't know of any electric skateboard remotes that are waterproof. Yeah, I would still advise you to not ride in the rain, but sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you get caught in the rain. So on the Mini 3, it's using a Hobbywing ESC with a complementary app. And on the Mini 3 Pro, it's using Tynee's ESC rated for 80 amps, 2.0 ESC. So we don't know the power rating for this Hobbywing ESC, but it's probably not 80 amps. This is a lot, by the way. For a shortboard, this is really high, at least in my opinion. I know some of you like DIY people, like you guys go crazy with your power. For most like consumer grade boards, this is like really high for a shortboard. Like even for an all-terrain board, this is high. But for the Mini 3, it doesn't say. But I can tell you, like even the Mini 3 feels quite powerful to me. Like I said, I'm usually riding in mode 1. I guess during winter time when I'm wearing more protective gear, I'll probably go to mode 2. Well, actually, on this board, I might go faster because it is very stable. I'll talk about the stability later. The remote on the Mini 3 is the standard Hobbywing remote with a display. 2 buttons, a control wheel, USB-C charge port. A lot of boards use this. It's a fine remote. It's a good remote, but it's very common, but it's good. The Mini 3 Pro remote is better. There's more stuff you can configure and there's more data that you can see by pressing the power button. And also, my favorite thing about it is that there's a physical switch to switch from forward to reverse. When there's a physical switch for reverse, I go into reverse a lot more often. And it's not that I ride in reverse, but like, let's say I'm at a red light, I'm standing on the board, I don't want to step off the board, the light turns green, the person in front of me doesn't move. Why don't they move? I don't know. It happens here. Like I'm in the bike lane and a lot of times they're looking at their phones, and for me to ride around them, I have to back up a little bit. If I didn't have the reverse feature, then I would probably use my foot to like push back. Otherwise I have to double click. Well, I could double click and then go back and then double click again to go forward again and then go around them. However, when there's a physical switch on the remote, it's just really easy to just flick into reverse, back up a little bit, and then flick back into forward and then go around. Funny thing is, the old Hobbywing remote remotes used to have that switch, and then they removed it. But I'm glad that the Tynee remote has it. Both of these boards have smart turn on. It's the same as standby mode. I think I usually call it standby mode. I think I've called it smart turn on also. It's pretty standard nowadays. Mobile app, we already looked at that on the Mini 3. Mini 3 Pro does not have an app that you can use, but there are a bunch of settings that you can adjust in the remote itself. Regenerative braking, every electric skateboard has this. If you see another board that doesn't mention this, well, they have it also. So the motor brand for the Mini 3, for hub motors, it's Hobbywing, and for belt drive, it's a DXW, that's Dongxing Wei. Let's just call it DXW. The same motor brand with Evolve boards. That's really not a good selling point, honestly. The GTR had a reputation for having their motors overheat and go up in smokes. So on the Mini 3, it doesn't mention the size, but on the Mini 3 Pro, they mention 6355 motors. The motors are bigger on the Pro and a little bit smaller on the Mini 3. Motor power, just ignore that. So on the Pro, 2,775 watts, whereas on the Mini 3 non-Pro, for belt motor, 850. Does that mean that the Pro feels 3 times more powerful than the non-Pro? I think what it means here is that these motors can accept like about 3 times more power than these motors, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna use this much power. Yeah, just ignore these numbers. I think for most of us, like, these numbers don't mean anything. For the motors, you want them to be powerful enough to be able to handle the power that the battery and ESC can put out. If they can handle more, that's better. If they can handle a lot more, that's not necessarily better, because then you have a lot more unnecessary weight. Type has a typo. They both have a kicktail, and the kicktail is pretty short, which is fine by me. You know, I'm not going to be doing tricks on these boards. The short kicktail I feel is beneficial for picking up the board. Max load on both boards are the same. They both have 3mm foam grip tape. Wheels. Okay, so the Mini Pro only has one option for the wheels, it seems. 105mm hydro wheels. Actually, I thought I saw up here. Yeah, you can also get cloud wheels if you want. I'm not sure why anyone would want both. 105 cloud wheels, I feel they're maybe marginally more comfortable than the 105 hydros. I don't feel like it's a big difference. The hydros have a bigger core and less urethane than the cloud wheels, but there's also a rubber layer. Anyway, on the Mini 3 non-Pro, you have several options for wheels. You can get the standard 90mm wheels. So if you're going to be carving on smooth roads, I would get the 90mm, because these 105 wheels, if you turn really hard, they can get wheel bite. You can use 105, okay? But just like at very low speeds, if you're turning hard, if you're deliberately making a very sharp turn, you can get wheel bite. Wheel bite on a top mount board without cutouts in the deck. It's just how it is. But with 90mm, with smaller wheels, you're going to be less likely to encounter that. By the way, if you choose the 90mm wheels, I think you do not get the sealed belt drive covers. That only comes with the hydro wheels. Their wheel options are a little bit confusing. For people in the e-skate bubble, this is probably not too hard to understand, but like for a complete newcomer into electric skateboarding, I think they're going to be thinking, wait, the Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro, like the different ESCs, what does that mean? Like, why does one have these sets of features and the other have a different set of features? You know, why does one have these wheels and the other only have these wheels? Trucks, Tynee PE truck, upgraded on Paris V3. Okay, 7-inch, 43 degrees. What does that mean? 7-inch on an electric shortboard is pretty standard. Paris V3 is a popular skateboard truck, so I guess Tynee is saying that their trucks are better than the Paris V3. 43 degrees, what does that mean? So most trucks are 50 degrees. 45 is pretty common also. So what happens with a 45-degree truck is that, let's say the board leans 10 degrees, that means the truck is also going to turn 10 degrees. That's if the truck has a 45-degree base plate. And this is what that means, 43 degrees here. 43 degrees is a little bit less than 45, so that means that the truck is going to turn a little bit less than the amount that it leans. What does that mean exactly for the layman? That means these trucks are a little bit more stable than most other trucks. Most other trucks that use either 45 or 50 degrees for the base plate. This is going to be a little bit more stable, and it's also going to sacrifice a little bit of agility. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, you know, it depends on what you like. I will say that this board feels very stable to the point where I flipped around the washers. So these washers, they're pretty deep cup washers. So most cup washers, they're flat and then they kind of angle out. But these, they're kind of like those precision washers where there's like a hard edge. They're more restrictive, so the bushing doesn't compress as much compared to regular cup washers, and especially compared to like a flat washer. Flipping the washer upside down essentially makes the washer like a flat washer and allows the bushings to compress more. When I did that, I also noticed that the roadside bushing, by the way, these are 95A bushings according to Tynee. The roadside bushings, they're really tall compared to the board side. I think the board side bushings are like regular standard longboard size barrel bushings, but the roadside bushings are really tall, which is a bit unusual. On most boards, I think we see the board side and roadside bushings use the same size, but we also frequently see the board side bushings be a little bit larger than the roadside bushings. On this board, it's like the opposite. My understanding is that the board side bushing generally does more of the work compared to the roadside. So that's why we often see the roadside bushing as a little bit smaller, because you can make them bigger, but it's not going to make much difference anyway. At least that was my understanding. But I could be wrong. What do you guys think? If you want more maneuverability, you can change the bushings, you can flip the washers, you can change the washers to flat washers, but you also have to take into consideration the size of the wheels. Anyway, let's move on. Charging time, 3 to 5 hours. The charger is rated for, the output is 2 amps, and the battery is 8.4 amps. 3 hours is probably not very likely. 4 to 5 hours, probably more like 4.5 to 5.5 hours from empty to full. Brake pad, pre-installed brake pad. Brake pad, I'm pretty sure they're referring to the tail puck, because I think there's a picture up here. Yeah, it says brake pad. I think it's talking about this. You're not going to use this to brake because the tail is so short. I don't know if there's a proper name for this, but I would call it a tail puck. Pre-installed front protector. That's the bash guard in the front, and it's pretty cool. It's very nice looking. It doubles as a riser. It doesn't look like a cheap accessory that you add on. It just looks like part of the board, and it protects the board. Board dimensions, basically, it's one of those boosted mini style boards. The weight, okay, so the lightest version is hub motors with 90mm wheels at 8 kilograms. The two versions that I have are the belt drive with 105, and here they say 8.75, so not 8.8 but 8.75. I think that's what I got. I forget the number, but I got 8 point something on my scale. And for the Pro, they say 9.25. That sounds about right. I did get 9 point something. I hope I had footage. That's pretty fucking heavy, I gotta say, for a shortboard, which you have to carry in your arm. Because if this were a longboard, then you can pull it behind you. But for a shortboard, you just gotta carry the whole thing. I think that's pretty heavy, but considering the size of the battery, the size of the motors, it kind of has to be this heavy. So, this is partly why I personally don't want more range and more power sometimes, because it just adds more weight, which doesn't benefit me. With that said, I have recommended this board to a number of people. Some people, they want a short board, but they also need the performance, like maybe they live on hills and stuff. In that kind of situation, I'm not too confident about recommending the boards that I normally use, like say X-Wave Wave. Yeah, at 100% power, sure, it's gonna climb up a hill just fine. At 50% power, then it kind of depends on the hill, and it depends on how much you weigh and stuff. It may not perform as well. With a board like this, the Tynee Mini 3 or the 3 Pro, I don't think you really need to worry about voltage sag. Like even at 50% power, I think you're gonna be able to charge up a hill. So yeah, there are just pros and cons to everything. Let me quickly talk about the appearance. Okay, so this is not accurate. Oh, no, actually, sorry. This is using the 90mm wheels. Okay, so this is not the version that I have. The version I have is with the hydro wheels, which has the, what do you call it? The sealed belt covers. I think that might have made this part wider. I don't know what to call it. I think this is called the track width, like the distance between the left and right wheel. I forgot what it is. I think it's called the track width. It's wider than the front on my unit by quite a bit, by like 2 centimeters. I don't remember, but like visually I can see that the back is way wider than the front. It's just an aesthetic thing. I personally have a little bit of a problem with that, but practically speaking, it doesn't really matter. In fact, the fact that the track width on the back is wider, that just gives it additional stability. But like, I don't know, man. I just feel like it looks weird. On the Pro, the back is a little bit wider than the front also. Visually, it's not as noticeable. I like that the screws are hidden. In fact, I quite like the design of the enclosure. I think it looks very clean. It's very minimalist, but it looks good. You know how some brands, they have their battery enclosure that's just a box? Those boards, they look so cheap. They don't look good, but this to me looks a lot better, just aesthetically. Not just better, I think it looks really nice. I guess there's another thing I want to mention, which is the deck. When the deck arrived, there were these like little cracks in the paint, which I don't know, I didn't really like. I guess it doesn't really matter because like eventually you're gonna scuff up your board anyway. It's just when you have a brand new product, you don't want to see that kind of stuff. I guess that's all I have to talk about. So this board, yeah, I like it. It's just too heavy for me. It's really powerful. It's like way too powerful than what I need. And Aiden asked me which one I prefer, the Mini 3 or the Mini 3 Pro. I like the Mini 3 more just because it's lighter. It's only a little bit lighter, but like every little bit helps. I like the remote on the Mini 3 Pro more because of that reverse switch. I guess that's about it. If you're looking for a board in a short form factor and you need something powerful, like for hills, or you want to go really fast on a short board, I guess this is for you. It is a well-made board. I like it. It's a good board.